Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Film. Today we have a very exciting podcast episode for you guys, one that we've wanted to do for a while but had to get through the films. You actually watched them for the first time, which is exciting. I've watched them before, so we kind of both have knowledge about all these films. So today we are talking about the highly acclaimed and respected film studio which has made not only the best animated films of all time, but some of the best films of all time. We are talking about none other than Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. So the way this is going to work is that we're going to talk about the origins of the studio first, and then talk about a little bit about Hayao Miyazaki's history, and then all the films. So this is going to be quite a long podcast, but it's going to be exciting. So before we start, do you want to say anything?
As you mentioned briefly, I recently rewatched, or actually watched a lot of the Studio Ghibli films for the first time. The first Studio Ghibli film I ever watched was Ponyo. I watched that when I was probably, oh god, like 7 or 8 years old in theaters with my parents. And of course, I had no idea what Studio Ghibli was, or I wasn't really interested like as much as I am now into film. So it was kind of a blur, although I do remember being in awe of how amazing the frames and animation was, and even my parents were commenting on that. But I vividly remember the day we went because that day was I think it was a snowstorm happening, and halfway through the movie, the entire movie theater had a power outage. So everything blacked out, like right in the middle of the movie. So, and that was like the first time and only time that has ever happened to me. So we had to get a refund and walk out of the theater halfway through watching it, and then rewatch it a week later when everything was calmed down.
Yeah, I remember actually watching Ponyo in theaters as well, and I was like so shocked by the animation and the visuals. Like I was like, this is something that I've never seen before in animated films. And I also remember watching it with my sister and my grandfather when, my sister and I were younger, and he also really loved it because he was like, wow, this is actually so beautiful, like the animation. So,
Yeah, and
so
I think that sometimes animation can be overlooked in a sense as just being like for kids or in more of the family movies, but
yeah,
there is an insane amount of work that goes into making any type of animation,
yeah.
right?
If
And these Studio Ghibli films are just like, if you, we'll talk about it more, of course, later on, but if you think about how each frame is hand drawn,
Yeah,
handcrafted, redrawn, redone based on the plot and the dialogue, and everything is put together. It they focus not only on making a good film with a good plot, but making it so visually striking and appealing. And it's hard to do that with animated films, right?
yeah.
Sometimes the plot gets lost within the animation because they're so worried about the visuals. But
Mm.
Studio Ghibli just like blends everything so well, and they're really, I think, put, as you said, to a really high standard in the animation industry, and I think they need to be talked about way more in
Yeah,
film in general. Like these films are beautiful.
yeah.
So, and I mean, we've seen people even in the industry praise them. Like I know Leonardo DiCaprio said one time that his favorite animated film of all time was Princess Mononoke.
Yeah, yeah,
So, like, we need to talk more about Studio Ghibli. Is the moral of the story?
yeah. And today we're going to be talking about them. So, we're going to be talking about a brief history about Studio Ghibli. Obviously, you guys can do your own research by the end of this podcast, and hopefully, it inspires you and motivates you to check some of these films out. So, we are actually going to start with the origin. So, briefly, we're just going to talk about um, just how Studio Ghibli came about, who were the main people involved. So basically, Studio Ghibli was founded in June of 1985 in Tokyo by four men. Their names were Isao Takahata, Toshio Suzuki, Yasoshi Tokuma, and the well-known film producer Hayao Miyazaki.
And just a forewarning, we're trying our best with these pronunciations.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, just mind us if we and don't we mispronunciate something or any of those things.
yeah.
Um, so Yeah, just forewarning about that, but continue on.
Yeah, so the two of the men, Suzuki and Tokuoma, were mainly producers, but then Isao Takahata, who sadly passed away in April 2018, directed incredible features on the studio's behalf. So one of his best known work is the heart-wrenching semi-autobiographical tale of the post-war Japan, Grave of the Fireflies. And this film is famously difficult for viewers to endure because of all the themes of the war and stuff like that, but it's widely regarded as a masterpiece. But I've heard that some people actually can't watch this film more than once because it's actually very emotional and very hard to watch because it shows the
Oh wow.
realities of the war and the post war that happened in Japan. So yeah, but it's still worth a watch if you want to watch it for the first time. But I'm just warning you that some people actually could not watch it more than once.
Wow, that tells you a lot though about the impact of that film.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic.
So the term Ghibli, if you guys were wondering, is an Italian adaptation of the Libyan Arabic word that refers to, hot, dry winds in the desert. And so basically the whole idea behind choosing that particular name came from Hayao Miyazaki himself and his desire to revamp the animation industry. Basically, he described it like a wind blowing through and stirring up change, which is actually really interesting. And also, he actually achieved this goal because he and Studio Ghibli changed the animation industry. So it's actually really smart if you think about it, that term that they chose.
Yeah, I had no idea there was such a deep meaning behind it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And
Hmm.
I think that also is kind of a representation of Miyazaki's mentality towards animation in general. Like he
Yeah.
puts so much work and meaning behind everything that he produced,
Yeah.
and including the name of his own production company. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just goes to show like how motivated they were to create these films that they wanted to change the industry in a whole.
Hmm.
So at the same time, Studio Ghibli was also the name of an Italian. Well, Ghibli was the Italian name of an Italian warplane, and therefore that also represented Hayao Miyazaki's love for planes and for Italy in general. So the company logo features the most popular character named Totoro from Hayao Miyazaki's film My Neighbor Totoro.
So cute, Totoro.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
adorable. I loved him in that film. That film was so cute.
Yeah, it was really adorable. And also, fun fact, Totoro actually became the most loved Studio Ghibli character, and the merch for Totoro has been selling like crazy when it first came out
I
because
see it everywhere.
yeah, I see it like every time something comes up about Studio Ghibli, it's mainly all Totoro related because people
It's
just
so funny because in the film, I feel like the merchandising in the film character there's a little bit of a difference because in the film I feel like he's a little bit he can I thought he was a little bit creepy at first. Like
he,
his eyes are just very
but the way he smiles is also like kind of creepy.
yeah, but like well, at the same time once you just like you go to the film you just get you love this character.
Yeah,
You can love him for all his like imperfections or whatever it may be. So it's funny in that way, I think.
yeah. So before Hayao Miyazaki worked for Studio Ghibli, he actually already directed a few films called Lupin the Third, The Castle of Cagliostro, and a movie called Future Boy Conan. The first original movie that was directed by him was Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind in 1984. So some people actually argue that Nausicaa wasn't actually a real Studio Ghibli production because the movie was released a year before the studio was actually formed. Um, so people actually consider the first Studio Ghibli movie as Laputa Castle in the Sky. But, for the sake of this video, we're still going to consider it as a Ghibli film.
Right. It's the same person, same
Yeah.
being just different threshold of what they're under. But yeah, so continuing on. So back in the late 80s, anime was actually looked down upon in the film industry, and Miyazaki who is now a very influential and respected director, was also not highly regarded at this time because of it. Anime wasn't really mainstream like it is nowadays in Japan, so there weren't a number of theaters that were showing these movies, and of course viewership was limited. So movies that are now regarded as big successes like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Castle in the Sky, even My Neighbor Totoro were not famous at all back then. The breakthrough for Studio Ghibli was in 1989 when the movies Kiki's Delivery Service, which is really good if you haven't watched it, highly recommend. This was mainly thanks to advertisements on TV for the film. So they started to actually realize that because they weren't going to get into those mainstream movie theaters, they had to brand themselves using ads. So after this, Miyazaki and the producer Suzuki continued to make many more hits after Kiki, and as we see, they've been huge success ever since. The movie that made Studio Ghibli grow into an international brand for anime was, in fact, Princess Mononoke, which we talked about in 1997. In 1997, Studio Ghibli struck a deal with Disney to distribute some of their films to English-speaking audiences. So they wanted to start branching out after they had such well-founded success and respect from people in the industry. And it was through those advertisements and that branching out that people finally understood how amazing it can be to watch not only animated films, but foreign animated films, foreign films in general, which we would love to do a podcast episode on in the future, are
Yeah.
just incredible. Like, just as the Parasite director mentioned in his Oscar speech, once you get over that title of the subtitles, like trying to get over that barrier, there's such a huge world of just amazing, amazing films.
Yeah.
So on that note, continuing, in 1997, Studio Ghibli struck the deal, and part of this deal involved a stipulation that their films would not be edited in any way or for any reason. Famously, producer Harvey Weinstein wanted to edit Princess Mononoke for better marketability. This was a huge thing, and is still a prominent thing right now with films, that studio executives try and edit things that the directors or the producers wanted to happen originally for better marketability, or they don't think that things would work in mainstream media. So Harvey Weinstein wanted to edit some parts of the Princess Mononoke movie, but in short order, Miyazaki sent him an authentic samurai sword with a note reading only "no cuts." That is incredible.
Yeah.
That is like, what better of a way. And even Bong Joon-ho, the Parasite director, also did a similar thing with Harvey Weinstein. With, I think it was, what movie was it? It was his.
Was it Snowpiercer?
It was Snowpiercer, right? That's the film. It was something about the plot, I think, that he wanted to include, that Harvey Weinstein didn't want in, and apparently he made up this fake story about how that part of the plot had some sentimental value to him. So Weinstein was like, "That's fine," but really, it was just a lie to get in the film. So, but this is definitely top tier of one of the best excuses I've ever heard of to get a studio exec to release it. That's fantastic. So yeah, Hayao Miyazaki also has a reign on all merchandising rights, which prevents there from being an onslaught of cheap Ghibli-based toys in the American market. And these policies, although they might seem restrictive, they have really allowed these incredible films to be viewed the way they were intended. And that's, again, something that I think a lot of production companies are starting to try and adopt, is gaining full rights and not trying to lose distributing rights to other bigger companies, because that obviously kind of dilutes the quality of what's being put out. And we've seen that happen a lot with the different things. Hayao Miyazaki wants to keep the focus on the narrative and the characters, and he's said this in many different interviews. He wants people to appreciate Ghibli films as influential and important pieces of art, movies that aren't watered down by concentrating exclusively on market appeal. Again, I think this should be a really high motto for the film industry. It's such an important thing to live by. Don't water down your art for the sake of marketability or financial gain, right? So the Ghibli films do have market appeal, regardless of people trying to edit them. And they've proven time and time again to touch the lives of audiences all over the world, even without being forced into the most easily digestible Hollywood mold, the basic mainstream cookie cutter movie that we think everyone wants.
Yeah. And I think that goes to show that like you could let a director have the creative freedom and it can still have the marketability that,
Of
the
course.
studios want.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So now we're actually gonna talk about Hayao Miyazaki himself and his brief history and how he got into his love for film and animation. So, Hayao Miyazaki was born on January 5th, 1941, in Tokyo, Japan. The Japanese film director and producer, whose lyrical and elusive works won both critical and popular acclaim. Um, so, Miyazaki's father was actually the director of Miyazaki Airplane. It was a manufacturing concern that basically built parts for fighter planes. So they had a family business that was instilled in Miyazaki, and that's where his love for flying and planes came to be, and he made that apparent in like basically all of his works. He has a hint of planes and flying and all that stuff because he grew up with that. So after he completed his, studies in economics at one of the universities in Tokyo in 1963, he took a position as an entry-level animator at Toei Animation, a division of the Toei Studio, and it's basically Asia's largest producer of animation content. So while he was at the studio, he met fellow animators Isao Takahata and Ota Akimi. So one of these former animators actually became his lifelong friends, collaborators, business partner, and later on, after 1 year courtship, became his wife.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah. So after leaving that animation studio in 1971, Hayao Miyazaki accompanied his friend Isao Takahata and continued to work with him for various studios throughout, the 70s. Hayao Miyazaki's individual style became more apparent in the film Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, which was a monthly manga strip he wrote for a anime magazine. So the story basically followed Nashika, who was a princess and a reluctant warrior on her journey through an ecologically ravaged world. So the success of this film inspired a film with the same name, which was released in 1984. After that, it encouraged Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata to undertake a more, serious partnership arrangement.
Not and together, they launched Studio Ghibli in 1985, so that's when the foundation of Studio Ghibli was formed. The following year, Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky was released in Japan, and Nausicaa was released in the United States, retitled as Warriors of the Wind. Although the original film's impressive aerial sequences remained intact, confusing edits and poor dubbing, actually, I remember reading this, rendered Warriors of the Wind virtually unwatchable. So more than a decade would pass before Miyazaki would consider another Western release. So because a lot of things were changed when he decided to show it in the U.S., it was just they overdubbed it. I remember reading articles about
Mhm.
people saying the edits were unclear. It
Yeah.
almost looked like it was like they were overlaying scenes on top of scenes to try and change what was originally created.
Yeah.
And so Miyazaki after that was obviously very disheartened by what had happened, and he didn't feel comfortable releasing another film in the US for a decade after that. So Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli continue to produce works for their domestic market in Japan. However, My Neighbor Totoro debuted alongside Grave of the Fireflies in 1988. I still have to see Grave of the Fireflies. While both films were well received critically, The financial success of the studio was secured by the phenomenal sale of Totoro merchandise, which we talked about in the beginning. Totoro, and obviously it's become so big that they put it in their logo.
Yeah.
Totoro just became such a widely, it became a universal character in the film industry and in animation. So in Japan and even in the Western countries, Totoro became a really good marketing merchandising item that people could buy. He was almost unknown in the West until the release of Princess Mononoke in 1997, and it was a blockbuster that broke Japanese box office records. So in Japan it did amazing, never mind in the US. The film revisited some of Miyazaki's recurring themes, which includes conflict between human progress and natural order, and the persistence of kind of like the spiritual world alongside what we would call the mundane. And you see a lot of these themes recurrent in that.
Mm-hmm.
Miyazaki's Spirited Away captured the top prize at the 2002 Berlin International Film Festival, won the Best Asian Film at the Hong Kong Film Awards, and was named Best Animated Feature at the 2003 Academy Awards. Spirited Away, I don't even know how you would preface it.
Yeah.
It's like I don't think there's any way to describe it except for saying it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, like you just have to see it yourself to really know.
You have to, yeah, like and I think, for example, with me watching it the first time, I was kind of scared, almost not scared, but I just didn't know. I'm not really an anime person, I guess you could say. So I guess I was a little scared that it would be too much like anime and that I wouldn't enjoy it, but I was just like completely wrong in that sense. It was so beautiful seeing the story and the visuals, and I felt so calm watching it.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. So yeah, in his native Japan, it won Best Picture at the 2002 Japanese Academy Awards, which I did not know actually they had. And this is a fun fact: it replaced Titanic as the top-grossing film in Japanese history. It replaced Titanic.
Yeah, that's like shocking.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Especially for like a Western, Western films are very popular in these countries actually.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that. It's not just like the domestic market that's popular. So the fact that this film topped it as the highest grossing film of this small production animation company, that's amazing. In 2005, Disney unveiled a restored version of Nausicaa on DVD, featuring both the original Japanese soundtrack as well as a new professionally recorded English dub that was properly made that did not take away from the film. Spirited Away went on to be the first anime ever to win an Academy Award. Howl's Moving Castle and The Wind Rises were both nominated for Academy Awards in separate years, but did not win. But the fact that it was the first anime ever to win an Oscar,
Yeah. It's really crazy.
Such an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah.
Really. And then Hayao Miyazaki's films usually, as we said, have common themes among them. Some of these will include that kind of struggle between good and evil, environmentalism he actually touches on a lot, and politics even. The protagonists were usually strong, independent girls or young women, and the villains were typically uncertain in nature with their redeeming qualities. And that's one thing I also really appreciated about Studio Ghibli films, is that they put forth women and female-led narratives. That's what we need. Even during times where it may have been uncertain and not a common thing to do, he helped kind of boost that narrative and boost those other films that feature women-led stories, which was fantastic. And he didn't do it in a light that was demeaning or misogynistic or stereotypical. Like he focused on the characters and added the fact that they were female or that they were women or girls to enhance that, not to take over or to try and make it seem like it was just for the sake of doing it. So he handled that sense or aspect of his films very responsibly, very appropriately, very well done. And in 2015, he did receive an honorary Oscar from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for his work in animation, his work with Studio Ghibli, and his work in just making anime and those kinds of films much more well known in the industry.
Yeah, so that was, a brief history of Hayao Miyazaki. Obviously, you guys can do more research on him. He's a very interesting person because of, obviously if you've like seen his films, you can tell like his mind is like so creative and out of the box and out of the
Oh
ordinary.
yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys want to do more research, we highly recommend it. So now we are going to actually list all the Studio Ghibli films in order of release. So the first one was Nazca: The Valley of the Wind in 1984, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Castle in the Sky, 1986, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. My Neighbor Totoro, 1988, director Hayao Miyazaki. Grave of Fireflies, also 1988, director Isao Takahata. Kiki's Delivery Service, 1989, director Hayao Miyazaki. Only Yesterday, 1991, director Isao Takahata. Porco Rosso, 1992, director Hayao Miyazaki. Ocean Waves, 1993, Tomomi Mochizuki, that's the director. Pom Poko, 1994, director Isao Takahata. Whisper of the Heart, 1995, director Yoshifumi Kondo. Princess Mononoke, 1997, director Hayao Miyazaki. My Neighbors the Yamadas, 1999, director Isao Takahata. Spirited Away, 2001, director Hayao Miyazaki.
So then we have The Cat Returns, which was 2002, directed by Hiroyuki Morita. Again, I apologize for mispronouncing. Then Howl's Moving Castle, 2004, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Ponyo, which was 2008, Hayao Miyazaki. So actually, that means that I was 4 when I watched it. Because I watched it in theaters. That's crazy.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was 4. I'm thinking I'm 7. I was 4. Wow. The Secret World of Arrietty, which was 2010, directed by Hiromasa Unibayashi. From Up on Poppy Hill, I love this film. 2011, directed by Goro Miyazaki. The Wind Rises, which is 2013, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. The Tale of Princess Kaguya in 2013, directed by Isao Takahata. And When Marnie Was There, which was 2014, directed by Hiromasa Yonibayashi. And actually, there's one coming out this year, I think, or has already come out, or is coming out.
I think it's coming out.
I think it's coming out. It's going to be called The Earwig and the Witch, or Earwig and the Witch, and it's going to be directed by Goro Miyazaki. So we have another Studio Ghibli film for 2020. Hopefully that saves that saves us. I need another Studio Ghibli film. And there's one coming up that has not been set release date that Hayao Miyazaki is working on. It's going to be called How Do You Live? He hasn't detailed too much about this plot or what it's going to be about, but he has described it as, in quotations, a big, fantastical story, as all of his films are. So that's going to be very exciting. And if you are interested in watching any of these films, Netflix actually has almost like a really. Do they have all of them, or do they have a majority?
I think they have a majority of them.
Okay, so there's a really good majority of these films on Netflix that you'd be able to go through, like all from Studio Ghibli, and I really highly recommend, if you do have Netflix, to go check them out because they're fantastic. So thank you, Netflix, as well, for doing that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about Hayao Miyazaki's accolades, the awards he's won, although we've mentioned it previously, but we'll go into more detail. So again, Hayao Miyazaki's crafted some of Ghibli's most celebrated works, his biggest in Western film industry being Spirited Away, which won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature in 2003. So his other accolades include the Japan Academy Prize for Picture of the Year for Princess Mononoke in 1998, Audience Award for Best Narrative Feature for Spirited Away in 2002, the Annie Award for Outstanding Directing in an Animated Feature Production for Spirited Away in 2002, and again for Spirited Away, the Los Angeles Film Critics Association for Best Animated Film.
Yeah. So in 2002, Spirited Away won the Golden Bear Award, and also in 2002, Spirited Away won Japan Academy Prize for Picture of the Year. Yeah, Spirited Away also won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature Film in 2003. Hayao Miyazaki won the Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement in 2005. Howl's Moving Castle won the Nebula Award for Best Script in 2007. Ponyo won the Venice Film Festival Mimo Rotella Foundation Award in 2008. Ponyo also won the Japan Academy Prize for Animation of the Year in 2009. Ponyo, the same year, in 2009, won Tokyo Anime Award for Best Director. Um, Hayao Miyazaki won the Academy Honorary Award in 2014. The Wind Rises won the Japan Academy Prize for Animation of the Year in 2014. So that's a lot of achievements.
Yeah, and that's not even just for Studio Ghibli, that's just Hayao Miyazaki himself and what
Yeah.
he's personally directed or created or won based on what he's produced.
Yeah.
So, a very well seasoned director, creator, all around great guy.
Yeah.
Really, I think you can tell he's kind of quiet and reserved, but I
Yeah.
think you can also tell how passionate he is
hmm
and how many ideas are just flowing in his head.
Yeah.
And just putting those on the screen or in the frames, it's fantastic.
Yeah, also I recommend watching this documentary that was filmed about him. It's 4 parts. I think you can find it on Google if you just type in Hayao Miyazaki documentary, 4-part documentary. It's really interesting, and he shows you his creative process behind making Ponyo, but through that you can also see like just how he works, how his creative process is, and just you can see literally like how he hand paints and draws all his frames. So yeah, I recommend checking that
I
out.
need to go check that out as well because I have not seen that, but I really want to.
Yeah, it's very interesting to just get into his mindset and kind of see how he thinks as a director, because directors are all different, and it's really interesting to get into their minds and see how they work.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now we're gonna talk about, like, very briefly, a attraction called the Ghibli Museum. So through Ghibli's deal with Disney, they've basically opted against the Disney theme park model, because through Disney all their films get an attraction at Disney World and the different Disney worlds um, that they have around the world in the different parts. But what Studio Ghibli did was that they created their own kind of attraction called the Ghibli Museum, and it's located in Mitaka, Tokyo, and it's about 20 minutes away from the actual like Hayao Miyazaki studio in um, a part of Japan.
I had no idea they had a separate museum.
Yeah,
That's
it's like
crazy.
I actually found this out like really recently. Like they have like
Wow.
all the attractions and everything.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so again, based on our research that we've done, this museum invites guests to experience the exhibits fully, asking that they don't photograph anything in favor of engaging with their surroundings, which I think is a very good thing to enforce. Upon paying their fare, tickets guests receive actual pieces of the original 35mm film used in theaters. That is amazing and such a creative idea to
Yeah,
do.
I actually didn't know that until I researched it.
Yeah, and guests can hold their tickets up to the light to see what classic Ghibli scene they've acquired. I hope to one day see this Ghibli museum in person for sure, because this sounds amazing. That's so creative though, that you get to get a piece of a frame.
We should go there together one day.
Oh yeah, I would love to do that. That would be like a dream vacation or trip just to see all this.
Yeah, and I actually didn't even know they actually give you like the original
35mm. Yeah, that's fantastic. So creative,
Yeah.
really.
So now that we've like concluded, that's the conclusion of our research. If you guys want to do more research, then you guys go ahead, and we definitely recommend that you guys check these films out. So now I'm gonna ask you, what's your, kind of your favorite Studio Ghibli films? I mean, it's hard to name your favorite, but I,
Yeah,
I guess like,
I have a special place. I haven't seen every single one of these, but I've seen a good amount of them.
yeah,
I think I'm gonna have to say, okay, so Spirited Away for sure. I'm gonna say My Neighbor Totoro, just because I literally like fell in love with Totoro, even though
yeah,
I mentioned, like you said, he's a little creepy at first, but like you grow to love him. Um, I'm gonna say probably Kiki's Delivery Service because I love this story. It's just like it's a heartwarming story of um like kind of growing up and being on
hmm
your own but being able to work.
yeah.
And Kristen Dunst is in it, which I had no idea until I actually did some research on it
Honestly,
after
yeah,
I
they
watched
have
it.
like so many like popular American actors to do the voice, like the English version of these movies. It's like
Yeah.
really, yeah,
Um and I mean, of course it has witches, so I'm
yeah.
all for it because it's just fantastical and dreamy in that way, and I love it. Oh God, what else? Okay, so Princess Mononoke. I always mispronounce this. You have to
Mononoke,
help me out here.
Mononoke.
Mononoke, Princess Mononoke. I'll also say that one. I think the first time I saw the trailer for that, and I saw the kind of like, or not the trailer, I saw the poster for it. I was like, this is insane because you see the what was it, like the bear or the wolf?
Oh yeah, yeah.
The well, yeah, and she's in the um that whole getup of
The,
things, and I was like, oh, this is epic. This is automatically gonna be a really really cool thing, and
mhm.
it's a story of two worlds coming together.
And
You
also
know,
like just protecting the earth.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it tells a beautiful message in a
yeah,
way that people can understand it and people can enjoy.
yeah,
So, other quick mentions I'll say, when Marnie was there, you wanted me to watch, and I watched it, and I really liked it. And of course, Ponyo and Howl's Moving Castle. I think I'll say those for my favorites.
yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think my top three would be definitely Spirited Away because it's just like I as we said, we can't really describe it to you until you see it. Like there's so much
Yeah,
to
it's like a fever dream.
it's like really just like it captures you and like takes you to this different fantasy world with so much, there's
Life.
yeah, there's so much life, and like you really just like think that all these like spirits wouldn't have character to them, but all the characters have so much depth and emotion. It's like really just something special.
And if we were to explain it to you,
Yeah.
like if we were to explain the plot, like if you search up the plot of Spirited Away, you're gonna be like, this guy's insane.
Yeah.
Who would even imagine that?
Yeah.
Um, if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But if you gotta give it a chance because it really just like it's it resonates with people from all different backgrounds, all different ages. It's not just a kid film.
Yeah. I think all of the Studio Ghibli films are like not only for
Right.
kids, but they're for like everyone.
Of course, of course.
So yeah, that's one of my favorites, Princess Mononoke, because it has some of the most beautiful hand-drawn animation I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, that's
And
very true,
obviously,
actually.
like I just love the whole story and the message about just protecting the environment, and that animals and humans can coexist.
Hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was a really nice message, especially at that time when it was made.
Of course, of
Yeah,
course. Like the message still reigns true today.
yeah, and I think that's why Leonardo DiCaprio really likes it because he's an environmentalist. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And I think my third one would be Howl's Moving Castle because just because of the whole fantasy aspect and the magic, and just Howl is such an amazing character.
He really
Yeah,
is.
I think he's just such an interesting character, and also the time period setting of the Victorian European era, that I love that.
It's so I think that film is also one where you really can see that fantastical aspect.
Yeah,
Like the magic is just like on full display.
yeah,
And that I think allows for so much more room to play.
yeah, yeah. Um, Also, like, I just love the how, when you think of Howl's like moving castle, you think of like this beautiful castle. Like in the film, the castle doesn't really look that appealing. It's like really, if you know what I'm talking about, it's really like
Yeah.
it's a very interesting looking castle,
Yeah, yeah.
but I still kind of like it.
Too, it's fine.
Yeah. So then I would say My Neighbor Totoro, obviously, because of the whole. I feel like that film is very youthful. Like it tells a story about two girls that come across, this big creature
Sure.
named Totoro, and they go on this adventure, and it kind of shows all the youth and just everything about like being a kid. So that one really I love that one, and Ponyo obviously because the story. I think Ponyo is also one that you would be like, how did this guy come up with this?
Yeah, yeah, very true.
Because it's about like a fish who wants to become a human, like so it's like
Yeah. It's very odd. It's like honestly that film is a fever dream if I've ever seen one.
yeah.
That one is really just like whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very unique concept, but I mean it's done really well,
Hmm.
and also like the visuals are really amazing. So I think I would say those are my favorites, but I love all of them. So
Yeah.
they all I think with Studio Ghibli, it's like they all have so much. They all are so unique in their own way, and every one of them just tells a different story. And like they're when you see them, they're like all just feel good films. Like when
Hmm.
you can watch them when you're feeling um, down or sad, and I think that you'll just instantly feel better
Oh, for sure, for
because
sure.
because
It's really like if you need it,
yeah,
this is the place. That's the thing you need to watch.
yeah,
That's the thing you need to do.
yeah. So that is the conclusion of our podcast. Thank you guys
Hmm.
so much for listening. We really enjoyed doing the research and talking about this studio and also the creators and also just animation in general.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. And again, we had so much fun researching and falling more in love with Studio Ghibli as we learned more about them and their history and just it's a great if you want to get into film and you want to watch a good film, Studio Ghibli is the place to go for sure.
Yeah, like just and also like if you guys want any animation film recommendations, I think we would definitely recommend Studio
Yeah,
Ghibli.
for sure. But yeah, with that being said, thank you again so much for listening. Keep an eye out for more content this week and another episode in another 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
think our next episode, we were talking about maybe discussing our favorite novel to film adaptations. We'll
Yes.
see if that actually happens, but I think that's what we're gonna
Yeah.
do next week, just for a little break, talking more of opinions
Yeah.
and that stuff.
We like to
Um,
like really just like balance out all our podcast topics. So
yeah.
like some
So
history, some opinionated, all that.
cool. All right. So thanks, guys, so much, and we'll talk to you soon or see you soon. Bye.